Musical musings, musical musings, musical musings, musical musings.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to the latest episode of Musical Musings, airing every Wednesday at 1 p.m. This program is broadcast to you from Rajamachan, University of Technology, Peranakan. This program will come to you in two parts. For the first part, I will introduce an artist and a song to you. We'll talk a little bit about the artist, and then we'll talk a little bit about the background of the song, and also its main themes, like what it's all about, what the song is about. Then we'll take a break and listen to the song. Then when we come back for the second part, we will analyze the lyrics, focusing especially on anything that may be difficult to understand, any difficult vocabulary, slang, idioms, anything like that. All right, let's get to the show.
Musical musings, musical musings, musical musings, musical musings.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Gary Gray, and I am your host for Musical Musings. I am an American English teacher here in Thailand, working at this university right here, Rajamachan, University of Technology, Peranakan. I have been teaching here for over 8 years, and as I've explained in some of the more recent episodes of our program, I do like to incorporate music into the classroom. Sometimes I think it's better than just learning out of our books. Textbooks are great. They're going to teach us all those kind of things we need to know for grammar, some vocabulary, things like that. But we learn a language in order to communicate. So in normal conversation, people will usually use slang terms, idioms, things like that, which are usually not in textbooks. So we need to learn some of those things. One way to learn them is through cultural elements, movies, TV programs, or, in this case, music. So this program focuses on music, just as I like to use it in my classroom sometimes. Okay, so for today's episode, we're going to be doing the song Your Wildest Dreams by the Moody Blues. Okay, so first let's talk a little bit about the Moody Blues. The first thing I have to say, right off the top, is that we've done them before. I try not to do artists more than once. As we've been doing this program now for 2.5 years, we're probably going to be coming back around to doing artists more than one time. And we have done a few so far. We've done a few artists 2 times. We haven't done anyone 3 times. But there's a specific reason why we're doing the Moody Blues again for the second time. And that is because as of this recording, we are recording in October of 2025, and the news just came out in the last few days that John Lodge has passed away. Now, who is John Lodge? He is the lead singer of the Moody Blues. So, in honor of John Lodge, we're going to do another Moody Blues song, and we're going to do Your Wildest Dreams. Okay, so since we've already done the Moody Blues, we don't need to talk a lot about their background, but you may not have seen that episode or heard that episode, so I'll give you just a little bit more information on them. So they formed in England, in Birmingham, England, in 1964. So that's over 60 years ago. And their music kind of changed early in their career. Early on, I think they were more R&B. But for most of their career, they were kind of psychedelic rock or progressive rock. I think most people nowadays would call them progressive rock. Psychedelic rock, it's hard to even describe what that is. It's a little bit of a crazy sound, a little chaotic. Probably a little more keyboard than you're used to hearing, synth or keyboard in there than you're used to hearing in rock music at that time. There came more of that in the later 70s and early 80s with groups like Rush and Styx. I mean, Styx had been around for a long time, but in terms of really incorporating that synth a lot. But that mostly then became known as just kind of progressive rock. Like most people would call Styx or Rush progressive rock. I'll be honest with you. To me, it's just rock. I mean, what? Because they use the synthesizer a lot? That's suddenly progressive rock? I don't know. We talk about genres a lot here, and every time we talk about them, I say that I don't want to talk about them. And that's why, because there's so much crossover, there's so much combination, that some of these genres are almost meaningless. But if you were going to put a genre on the Moody Blues, most people would put them probably into the progressive rock category. All right, so throughout their career, they had a lot of big hits, but what's surprising, and maybe it's the uniqueness of their sound, is that most of them didn't catch on too big. For example, in the U.S., they only had 3 top 10 hits in the U.S. Go Now, which was one of their earlier songs, Nights in White Satin, which was their top hit, and that is the song, by the way, that we did the first time we did the Moody Blues. That was their top hit. It got to number 2 in the U.S., and Your Wildest Dreams, which is what we're doing today. So those are their 3 top 10 hits, and Your Wildest Dreams only barely got there. But I would say that they're considerably more popular than that. Why? Because they did have a couple others, 2 or maybe 3, I forget what it was, but they had 2 or 3 others that got into the top 20. They had a bunch that got into the top 100. Also, in their home country of the UK, they did a little bit better there. By the way, I said they were from England, and then I said the UK. The UK is kind of a weird country because it's multiple countries within a country. A lot of people use that word interchangeably, England and UK. That used to actually be acceptable, so that's fine if you still do it. But in more recent times, we try not to do that very often because they're really not the same. England is one of the countries within the UK. There's also Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. So you've got there's also a couple of little sort of semi-independent islands and things like that, but basically that's the UK. The UK also has territories overseas, like in the Caribbean, they have some islands there, things like that. But as far as the UK itself, the UK United Kingdom is made up of England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. But I was not incorrect in saying that they're from England. Birmingham is in England. So for the Moody Blues, yes, they're from England, and yes, they're from the UK. Yes, both. Because England is part of the UK. At any rate, they did a little bit better in the UK than they did in the US, so they had a few more top hits there. So they really had a ton of big hits, even though if you compare them to some other really popular groups, you're not going to see all those top 10 hits that you see from other big groups. Like if you were to look at big pop stars from the 80s, like Michael Jackson, there's going to be many, many, many top 10 hits. They didn't have a lot of those, but they still had a whole lot that were like in the top 100. All right, so so if you were to like list the biggest, best bands in the world, these guys would probably not be at the top tier. But they're probably going to come in just below that. They're going to be really high up there, but they're not going to be the top tier, but they'll be just below there. That's my opinion on it. Of course, everyone has different opinions. Someone who's a big fan of theirs may say, oh, no, they're underrated and they're one of the best ever. And actually, I do really like them, so I kind of do think they're underrated. So anyway, that's the Moody Blues. And I don't think we need to say too much more about them because, like I said, this is the second time we've featured them on the program. So today we're doing the song Your Wildest Dreams. And it barely made the top 10. That's what I'm saying. They didn't have a lot of top 10s, but they had a lot of top 100s, a lot that actually made the chart. Because it got to number 9 in the U.S., and that was in 1986. This is, I believe, I don't have a timeline of their discography. That's like when all of their albums and all of their songs came out. I believe this was the third of the 3 top 10 hits they had. I think this was the latest one. I did see it on the list, so I think that's right. But also 1986 is getting a little late for the Moody Blues. Again, they formed in 1964, so they had half of the 60s, all the 70s, and now by 1986 they had half of the 80s. So this is a fairly late hit for them. Again, in 1986, and it was written by their guitarist, Justin Hayward, for the album The Other Side of Life. And it's a really simple song. It's a little bit long, so that's why we're trying to keep this first half a little bit short here. A lot of lyrics to go over, but the idea is simple. It's about reminiscing about your first love, your first girlfriend in this case, because it's being sung by a guy and he's straight, so it's about his first girlfriend. And apparently, either the girlfriend didn't really take it seriously, or he wasn't her first boyfriend, and so it's more forgettable to her. So it's kind of this weird situation where the two people have kind of different views on that relationship. And so, like, for example, in one of the lines, it asks whether or not she thinks about him, because he thinks about her a lot, because this was like his dream woman, and then she broke up and whatever. So he reminisces about it a lot. He thinks about it a lot, whereas for her, So he's kind of wondering if she even remembers. That actually is another line to the song. I wonder if you still remember. So that's kind of what the song is about. It's about him reminiscing about his first love and what a big deal it was for him. And he's wondering if she even remembers at all. All right? So that's what the song's about. So let's go ahead and get to the song. As always, those of you listening on YouTube, we will give you the link in the upper right corner because we cannot show you the video here. So please click on that link. Jump to the video. Once the video's over, you could just click back here for the second part of the program. And if anyone else is listening by streaming or radio, obviously we're a radio station, we can play the music. So if you're just listening, we can embed the music here, and you should be able to listen just fine. All right, let's get to the song.
Musical musings, musical musings, musical musings, musical musings.
Welcome back, everyone. Okay, so that's a song about thinking about your first love. Okay, so let's get right to the lyrics. There's quite a few here. The way the song is structured, there's not really verses and choruses. I mean, there kind of is, if you consider the line, "Once upon a time in your wildest dreams," to be the chorus, but it's really just one line, or two, depending on how you break it up. The way it's listed on the lyric sheet, it's 2 lines. I'm not sure I'd really consider that to be a chorus. Just kind of does repeat, but I'm not sure that's really a chorus. So that's one of the reasons why there's a lot of lyrics here, because it's just, the whole thing is just a story. It's just changing. Okay, so let's get right to it. Once upon a time, once when you were mine, I remember skies reflected in your eyes. Okay? Once upon a time, we use that saying. That's kind of like an idiom in English, and it means kind of a long time ago. And a lot of times we'll use that for like fairy tales or stories. And so automatically he's kind of introducing this story with kind of this magical idea behind it. Once upon a time. Once upon a time, when you were mine, so in other words, they were boyfriend and girlfriend, I remember your eyes, the skies reflected in your eyes. Now, what does that mean? The skies reflected in her eyes? Does he really remember the skies being reflected in her eyes? No, usually what that means is like her eyes were either bright blue or they were very sparkly, like the light reflected, like the sunlight reflected. So she had bright eyes, maybe bright blue eyes, like the color of the sky, something like that. So that's what that means. I wonder where you are. I wonder if you think about me. Once upon a time in your wildest dreams. Okay. So, I wonder where you are. I wonder if you think about me. That's pretty easy, right? When we say wonder, it means you're thinking about that. So he's thinking about where is she? And he's thinking about, is she thinking about me? Once upon a time, again, long time ago, in your wildest dreams. Now, that being part of the chorus, it's a little, well, chorus, if that's what you want to call it. Like I said, it's not really a chorus. But I think that line's a little confusing. Because I think that one line is being spoken more as a narrator and not as from his perspective. Why do I say that? Because when we use the phrase wildest dreams, it means like the best thing that can happen. Like if I say, what would happen to you in your wildest dreams? And maybe you'd say, winning the lottery for 100 million baht or something like that. It's your wildest dreams. Well, it says in your wildest dreams. Well, if this is being sung from his perspective, from him, then that would be talking about his girlfriend. But his girlfriend, he's wondering if she even remembers it. So this line's a little unclear. I'm not sure what's meant here. The only way I can kind of try to figure it out is that maybe it's being sung from the narrator's perspective, because this is kind of the chorus. So this is separate from the rest of the song. And so he's saying, so the narrator is talking about the man here in his wildest dreams. So once upon a time in his wildest dreams. So in other words, a long time ago, this was the best thing he could have ever dreamed about. And from knowing what the song is about, a lot of times writers of songs won't even really tell you what it's about. They want you to interpret it yourself. You take the meaning of it however you want. In this case, they have actually, the writer actually has come out and said what the song is about. And I think he's okay to do that because I think it's relatively clear what it's about. So that's fine. And that's why my interpretation of that would make sense. Again, I'm not sure. I can't guarantee you. It's a little bit of a weird thing to do. Saying in your wildest dreams instead of in my wildest dreams. I'm not sure. But that's my best guess, is that he is... he's speaking third person there. So when he's saying in your, he's talking about him. Okay, so we continue on. Once the world was new, our bodies felt the morning dew. Okay. Once the world was new, okay, well, the world was never new, except like whenever the earth formed. So what does he mean? Well, everything feels, fresh when you're in a new relationship. Everything just seems fresh. So the world feels new. And our bodies felt the morning dew. I'm not sure if you know what dew is, D-E-W. That sometimes the grass in the morning is wet, even though it didn't rain. That's called dew that forms on the grass. So our bodies felt the morning dew. So in other words, they were laying down outside in the grass either all night or probably all night. They woke up. So they were enjoying each other all night long. Don't know what they were doing. Maybe they weren't doing anything bad because they were outside. But maybe they were. I don't know. But they were together all night long. Woke up in the morning dew. Okay? Our bodies felt the morning dew that greets the brand new day. Okay, so again, it's in the morning. Greets the brand new day. In other words, it's a new day. So, because the dew is in the morning. We couldn't tear ourselves away. Okay? To tear yourself away, I mean, tear means like to rip a piece of paper in half. That's not what we mean here. When you talk about tearing yourself away from something, it means you are almost obsessed with it. For example, a lot of people might say that in the modern world today, there's a lot of young people who can't tear themselves away from playing video games, especially on their mobile phones, especially on their phones. In other words, to tear yourself away from something means to pull yourself away from something that you're almost obsessed with. So in other words, they were almost obsessed with each other. That's how much they loved each other. Okay? I wonder if you care. I wonder if you still remember. So again, he's asking those questions about this relationship did not have as much meaning to her. So does she even still care at all? Or is it just nothing? Has she even forgotten? I wonder if you still remember. Maybe she doesn't even remember it. It was so long ago. Once upon a time, in your wildest dreams. Okay, then we get to the next verse, if that's what you want to call it. And when the music plays, and when the words are touched with sorrow, when the music plays, I heard the sound I had to follow. Once upon a time, once beneath the stars, the universe was ours, love was all we knew, and all I knew was you. I wonder if you know. I wonder if you think about it. Okay, I read that whole thing because it all goes together. Because what he's saying is when the music plays and when the words are touched with sorrow, he doesn't mean like touch, like touching something with your fingers. It means when the words have some sad lyrics, some sad sound to it. That's what sorrow is. Sorrow is sadness. So it's sad music. So when the music plays, I hear the sound I had to follow. In other words, when he says he has to follow, he means his brain follows. He's thinking of the sadness because he's sad at this old time that he doesn't have anymore because this was like the most fabulous woman he's ever been with. So that's what he means. His mind wanders into thinking about this. He's reminiscing. To reminisce means to kind of remember something from a long time ago in a positive way, but it could be somewhat sad as well, like it is here, because you don't have it anymore. So he's reminiscing about her. Once upon a time, once beneath the stars, again, beneath the stars, remember we talked about them laying out in the grass all night long, so beneath the stars, the universe was ours. In other words, they feel like they own everything because their love is so strong. It's just, the whole world is theirs. The universe was ours. Love was all we knew, and all I knew was you. Okay, that's a little bit of a tricky couple lines there, but just think about it. That one makes sense. I shouldn't really need to explain that one. Love was all we knew, and all I knew was you. In other words, the only thing in his life was loving her. Now he says, I wonder if you know. In other words, he's saying he wonders if she knows how he felt. And I wonder if you think about it. Once upon a time, in your wildest dreams. Okay. Then we do get a repeat there. Says, and when the music plays, and when the words are touched with sorrow, when the music plays, and when the music plays, I hear the sound I had to follow. So he changes it a tiny bit there, repeating one of the lines, but it's basically a repeat of what we just had. And then we have the final part here. Once upon a time, once when you were mine, I remember skies mirrored in your eyes. All right, so that's kind of going back to remember the first verse, if that's what you want to call those, where he says, I remember skies reflected in your eyes. Reflected, mirrored, means the same thing, right? You look in a mirror to see your reflection. It's the same thing. So he's basically saying the same thing we had in the first verse. I wonder where you are. I wonder if you think about me. So that's also the same thing from the first verse. So we're repeating the first verse there. Once upon a time, in your wildest dreams. And that's basically the end of the song. He repeats that last part a few times, and that's it. That's the song. So again, it's a song about reminiscing. That's a big word. Remember that word. That's about kind of remembering things from the past, and it's remembering nice things. Although sometimes, like I said, there might be some sadness in there. Remember, he says it's when the sad songs are playing that makes him think about it. Because it could be sad because it's from the time past. For example, I've mentioned on this program a few times that my brother passed away a few years ago. And so when I reminisce about the times I had with him, yes, they're good times. They're happy times. They're fun times. But there is some sadness, too, because he's gone now. We can't do those things anymore. There will be no more fun, happy times to be had with my brother. So there are some sad parts to that. Okay? So it could be tinged with sadness, but that's what reminiscing is. It's thinking about the old times, thinking about good things from the past, but there could be some sadness with that. Okay? So that's what the song's about, reminiscing about his first love. All right? That is Your Wildest Dreams by the Moody Blues. All right, as always, when I close out my programs, I do like to mention some other songs from the band that are worth checking out. I could list probably 10 or 15 songs from this band that are worth checking out. I'll just list some of their top ones. Nights in White Satin. That one was their most popular one. That's the other one we've already done on this program. We have Your Wildest Dreams, which we just did today. Tuesday Afternoon, which did not make the top 10, but almost. I believe that finished at 12, 15, something like that at its peak. I'm Just a Singer in a Rock and Roll Band. Go Now. Ride My Seesaw. And Question. Again, there are many others. If you like the music, go check them out. They have a lot of good music. I mentioned in the first part of the program that I think they're underrated. And once again, let me just repeat as we close out the program that the reason we're doing a second sitting of the Moody Blues is because we're doing this to honor John Lodge, who passed away at the age of 82. He was 82. Pretty good life, right? So, but it's still sad that he passed. And from the most recent photos I've seen of him, it looked like he was still in pretty good shape, even though he was getting older. So, pretty sad that he's passed. And so that's why we're doing the Moody Blues again. As I mentioned in the first part of the program, we usually try not to do an artist more than once. Eventually we will have to. We've been doing this for 2.5 years. In fact, I already have the next couple of artists lined up, and they will both be new artists that we have not done before. We're going to do Gary Newman, and we're going to do the Cars. I think that's just kind of a funny juxtaposition to put in a row, because we're going to do the song Cars by Gary Newman before we do the band, the Cars. So that's how we're going to do that. That's going to be our next two episodes. So for now, that is it for the Moody Blues and Your Wildest Dreams. Thank you all for joining us for today's Musical Musings program. Any young people out there listening who are going to be off to college within the next, 6 months or a year, why not consider our university? We've got a great little university here. Not so little. We got 4 campuses, but we got a great university here. Rajamakan University of Technology, Peranakan. So consider our university. All right. Please stay with us and tune back in next week for another great song. Also, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you.
Musical musings, musical musings, music.